This isn't a place for single mothers and hungry kids. The diner owner shouted. She hugged her children and turned away in silence. No one in the diner spoke up. No one asked them to stay until a military vehicle stopped outside, and two Marines walked in. Not ordering food. Why would a denied dinner make an entire Marine Corps furious? Welcome to QH. Let's uncover what really happened. Erin Mallory's hands trembled slightly as she counted the worn bills in her wallet. 2347s, all that remained after paying the heating bill that morning. Outside the small apartment window, snowflakes swirled in the bitter Brookhaven, North Carolina night. Christmas Eve lights reflecting off their crystalline surfaces. "Mom, are we still going out?" Sophie asked, her 7-year-old face peering hopefully around the doorframe. Behind her stood Ben, 5 years old and clutching the small stuffed bear his father had given him before deploying for the last time. Erin tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and forced a smile. At 29 she looked a decade older, her face bearing the quiet dignity of someone well acquainted with hardship, but determined not to surrender to it. "Yes, we're going," she said, zipping up Ben's jacket and straightening Sophie's red hat. It's Christmas Eve after all. 3 years had passed since the military chaplain and notification officer had appeared at her door with news that turned her world to ash. Sergeant Captain Mark Mallory killed in a transport accident, leaving behind a young widow and two small children. The life insurance had covered funeral expenses and part of their medical debt, but vanished quickly under the weight of everyday survival. Now Erin worked night shifts at a local convenience store, serving customers while her children slept under the watchful eye of Mrs. Abernathy from next door. Every penny was accounted for, every expense questioned, every luxury deferred indefinitely. But Christmas Eve demanded something special. A small memory for her children to hold through the long winter ahead. A proper dinner at a restaurant, even if just once a year. The Heirloom Diner sat on Main Street, its windows steamed with warmth against the freezing night. Erin had chosen it carefully. Its menu featured a children's special for $5, which meant all three could eat for just under $20 with a careful tip. The bell above the door jingled as they entered. Sophie's eyes widened at the Christmas decorations, while Ben pointed excitedly at the dessert display. Erin guided them to a booth in the corner, as unobtrusive as possible. A waitress brought water and menus, smiling distractedly before moving on to another table. In the far corner, two young men in casual clothes that couldn't quite hide their military bearing sat nursing cups of coffee. Erin ordered the smallest adult meal for herself and children's specials for the kids. As the waitress left, the diner's owner, Mr. Rollins, emerged from the kitchen. His gaze swept the restaurant, pausing when it reached Erin's table. His approach was swift, his expression darkening with each step. "Excuse me," he said, voice pitched to Carrie. "Those kids better not make a mess." Erin nodded quickly. "They won't, sir. They know how to behave." Mr. Rollins's eyes narrowed, taking in her worn coat, the children's mended clothing. "Can you actually afford to eat here?" The dining room quieted. Nearby customers shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by their plates. "Yes," Erin whispered. "I have enough. This isn't a charity case." Mr. Rollins continued, voice rising. "This isn't a place for single mothers and hungry kids. We run a respectable establishment." Ben's lower lip trembled. Sophie stared at the tablecloth, cheeks flaming. Erin stood slowly, dignity intact despite the humiliation burning her face. "Well, go. I'm sorry to have bothered you." One of the young Marines half rose from his seat, but his companion gripped his arm. "Not now, Martinez. Not tonight." As Erin guided her silent children toward the door, snowflakes already accumulating on the sidewalk outside, not a single voice was raised in their defense. Kind people often pay the highest price, but sometimes it's the only path they know how to walk. Can such silent dignity awaken what's right in the hearts of others? Erin closed the apartment door behind them, the meager warmth inside barely cutting through the chill that had settled in her bones. It wasn't the December cold that froze her. It was the memory of her children's faces as they were escorted out of the diner, confusion and shame mingling in their innocent eyes. "I'm not hungry anyway," Sophie announced unconvincingly, her small voice attempting bravery. Ben looked up at his mother. "Did we do something wrong?" Erin knelt to meet his gaze, her hands gentle on his shoulders. No, sweetheart. Some people just forget how to be kind sometimes. She moved to the kitchenette and opened a cardboard box on the counter. Christmas cookies from the church food pantry, slightly stale but decorated with cheerful red and green frost. Breaking them into pieces, she arranged them on a plate with ceremonial care. Look, she said with forced brightness. Christmas cookies for dinner. That's even better than restaurant food, isn't it? The children nodded, playing along with her pretense of adventure rather than necessity. As they nibbled their makeshift meal, Aaron's gaze drifted to the cardboard box in the corner. It held their most precious possessions, photo albums and mementos of Mark, that wouldn't fit on their apartment's sparse shelves. Atop the stack lay a framed photograph of a smiling Marine in dress blue, his eyes crinkling at the corners, just like Ben's did when he laughed. Scrawled across the bottom in Mark's distinctive handwriting, "For those we leave behind." Morning arrived with unexpected consequences. Someone at the diner had recorded Mr. Rollins's outburst on their phone. The video spread through local social media channels, comments accumulating with each share. "Who does she think she is, dragging kids out for sympathy meals?" wrote one commenter. Entitled "Much, restaurants aren't daycare centers," added another. But others responded differently. "I've been where she is, only I didn't have two little ones, depending on me. Those kids were better behaved than most who eat there regularly." In a private Marine Corps veterans group, the video sparked a different conversation. A user with the handle Desert Dog 78 commented, "McKinley, wasn't that the name of a Marine from the Fallujah deployment?" The question set off a chain of messages. Service records checked, connections made. Within hours, Major Adam Sterling, currently stationed at Camp Ridgefield, just outside Brookhaven, received a text message with the video link, and a name he hadn't heard in years. "Sir, isn't this Sergeant McKinley's widow? The one who pulled Thompson and Rodriguez from that burning Humvee?" Meanwhile, Mr. Rollins responded to the growing controversy with a terse statement to local news. "My establishment has the right to refuse service to anyone. We maintain certain standards." Aaron remained silent through it all, unaware of the digital storm surrounding her family's Christmas Eve humiliation. When contacted by a local reporter, she politely declined to comment. Instead, she took her children to the community church service. Afterward, quietly volunteering to wash dishes for the holiday meal program. As she scrubbed pots in the church kitchen, Sophie and Ben played with other children, whose families had come for the free Christmas dinner. "Your mom's helping a lot," the kitchen coordinator told the children. "You must be very proud of her." Sophie nodded solemnly. "She says when you've been hungry, you should help feed others when you can. Some people don't need to be seen, they only need to be understood. If you believe gratitude is something that should never be forgotten, type respect." The day after Christmas, Erin sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the utility notice. "Final warning before disconnection," the bold letters announced, detailing the winter surcharge that had pushed her carefully balanced budget into deficit. She quickly folded the paper and tucked it into her pocket, as Sophie and Ben emerged from their bedroom. "Is it cold outside today too?" Ben asked, pulling his blanket around his shoulders. "Just a little," Aaron answered, though the apartment's thermostat had been lowered to 62 degrees to save money. "We'll cuddle under blankets later and read stories. It'll be cozy." Sophie looked thoughtfully at her mother. "Mom, would Dad know about what happened at the restaurant? Does he see us from heaven?" Aaron's throat tightened. "I think he sees the important things," she meant. Across town, the Heirloom Diner was experiencing its usual post-Christmas lunch rush. Mr. Rollins moved between tables, greeting regular customers, and directing his waitstaff with characteristic brusqueness. The video controversy had brought a few negative comments online, but his loyal customer base seemed largely undisturbed until the dark green military vehicle pulled up outside. Conversations paused as two Marines in crisp service uniforms entered. Unlike the casual off-duty presence of military personnel common in Brookhaven, these men moved with official purpose. They didn't take a table or approach the counter for takeout. Instead, they stood just inside the entrance, scanning the room. One nodded to the other, who stepped outside briefly before returning with a third man, Major Adam Sterling, his rank insignia catching the light. Mr. Rollins emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Mr. Rollins, Major Sterling asked, though it wasn't really a question. "We'd like a word." When they were seated in a corner booth, the major removed a photograph from an envelope. and placed it carefully on the table between them. "Do you recognize this Marine?" he asked. Mr. Rollins glanced at the picture of a smiling man in combat gear, arm thrown around a fellow Marine amid a dusty landscape. "Should I? Sergeant Captain Mark Mallory. He died 3 years ago, leaving behind a wife and 2 children." The Major's voice remained level, professional. "The same family you refused service to on Christmas Eve." Color drained from Mr. Rollins's face. "I didn't. I had no idea who they were." "Exactly," Major Sterling said. "You had no idea that Sergeant McKinley saved 5 Marines during an ambush. You had no idea he received the Bronze Star posthumously. You had no idea that the woman you humiliated has been working 2 jobs to keep her children fed since losing him." The Major leaned forward slightly. "We Marines have been hungry too, Rollins, but we've never turned away another hungry person, especially not the family of one who gave everything." By afternoon, a sign appeared in the diner's window, authorized by the local Veterans Association. It read simply, "Refused service to the children of a fallen hero." Business evaporated. Regular customers found other places for coffee. Christmas tourists read the sign and moved on. By evening, Mr. Rollins stood in an empty restaurant, the financial impact of his actions becoming unmistakably clear. At her apartment, Erin found an envelope that had been slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten letter on Marine Corps stationery. "Ms. Mallory, we once owed your husband our lives. Now we know how to repay that debt. Semper Fidelis isn't just a motto. It's a promise to our own." Marx Brothers. Accompanying the letter was a box containing gift cards for groceries, warm winter clothing in the children's sizes, and an educational savings bond for each child. That evening, as Ben tried on his new jacket, dark blue with red stripes, exactly like he'd wanted, he looked up at his mother with serious eyes. "Mom, can I be a Marine someday, like Dad?" Erin knelt beside him, straightening the collar of his jacket, as tears threatened to spill. "Only if you learn to protect others the way these Marines protected us." Sophie joined their huddle, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck. "We don't need that restaurant anyway," she whispered. "We have each other." When justice doesn't come from courtrooms, it arrives through the hearts of those who know what loss truly means. If you still believe in ultimate justice, type yes. Spring arrived in Brookhaven, melting winter's bitter memory. Erin's life had transformed in ways she could never have anticipated that snowy Christmas Eve. The Marines' intervention hadn't stopped with the gift box. 2 weeks after the incident, Erin received a call from Camp Ridgefield's Family Services office, offering her a part-time position as a kitchen assistant supervisor for the new recruits' mess hall. The hours worked perfectly around her children's school schedule. The pay was significantly better than her convenience store job, and the base provided transportation. "We need someone who understands what these young Marines need," the coordinator had explained. "Someone who knows what it means to serve, even if they never wore the uniform themselves." Erin still lived in the same modest apartment, but it no longer felt like a place of scarcity. Weekends brought invitations to base events and community gatherings. Sophie joined a reading club, run by officers' wives, while Ben found himself surrounded by surrogate uncles, eager to teach him everything from bicycle repair to proper saluting technique. On her small living room wall hung 2 photographs. The first showed Mark in his dress blues, his smile forever preserved. Beside it, a new picture, Erin and her children standing among a group of Marines at attention, all rendering a solemn salute toward Mark's photo. The simple frame bore an engraved plate. "You didn't just lose him, you inherited all of us." The heirloom diner eventually reopened, under new management, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant who had served with Mark. His first action was to establish a heroes table, always reserved for families of fallen service members. His second was to hire Erin as a weekend manager, turning her humiliation into authority. Mr. Rollins had sold the business after 2 months of community boycott, moving to another town where his Christmas Eve actions weren't common knowledge. Before leaving, he left an unsigned card with a substantial gift certificate at Erin's door, an apology without the courage to face her directly. Erin had donated it to the base's family emergency fund. One evening, as she supervised kitchen cleanup at the base, a young private approached her hesitantly. "Miss Mallory, I just wanted to say, my mom was a single parent too. What happened to you at that diner? It happened to us a lot." He straightened his shoulders. "I used to think the Corps was just about fighting. Now I understand we're also about standing up for people who deserve to be served." Erin smiled, recognizing in his earnest face the same determination she saw daily in her mirror. That's exactly what Mark would have said. As she drove home that night, Erin passed the diner where their Christmas Eve had unraveled. Through the windows she could see families gathered, including several in military uniform. The hero's table was occupied by a young woman with a toddler, another widow being honored rather than humiliated. Some meals are never served, but we remember them forever for who was turned away, and who chose to stand beside them. That spring evening, Erin stood on her balcony, watching Sophie and Ben chase Bubbles across the tiny courtyard. She held the letter from Camp Ridgefield gently, rereading the part that mentioned Michael's legacy. It wasn't just about one meal, it was about dignity rediscovered, voices lifted in her defense, and the unshakable truth that love endures louder than shame, longer than winter. When I first heard about Erin's story, it reminded me of my own mother. There were nights when we had nothing but kindness from strangers to hold us over. We never forgot those faces. That's why this story matters. Not because it went viral, but because it proves something simple. The strongest people aren't always the ones in uniform. Sometimes they're the ones just trying to feed their kids. If this story reminded you of someone, share it with them. They deserve to know they're not alone. We told their story. You gave it meaning. Thank you.